course, we're still looking at King Ahab. We're trying to go through, Lord willing, this is the goal, to go through every king of Israel. And I know I repeat myself at the beginning of each lesson just about, but I do that on purpose. We're following the line of corrupt kings, really, from the northern kingdom. And we're looking at Ahab, and it amazes me how much material the Bible tells us about Ahab. There's a lot about Ahab. And I don't think the Bible just puts it in there just to fill up space, but there's good reason for it. But, and he was not a good king. He was one of the worst kings, if not the worst king. But we've spent several weeks so far looking at just his evil reign, dark evil reign of Ahab. In summary, he was a man, he was a king that sold himself to do evil. He institutionalized Baal worship. He made that the state religion, Baal worship. He was covetous. He murdered Naboth, a completely innocent man. And in response to Ahab's wickedness, and especially in response to what he did to Naboth, God sent Elijah to him to pronounce a fatal sentence on Ahab. It was a message of doom and destruction for Ahab, but not just for Ahab, but for his entire house. And so in chapter 22, this is really the final chapter of Ahab's life. And it begins by telling us that Ahab got to enjoy 3 years of peace. And I wonder if during those 3 years of peace, Ahab kind of wondered, well, maybe God forgot that prophecy of my death and doom. But no, not at all. God's clock is still ticking here. But what we're going to see in this chapter is, I think there's a good lesson on just the danger of a person hating the truth. And that describes Ahab to a T. He was a man that hated the truth. But it also shows us that it is absolutely impossible to escape God's judgment once he's declared it on you and that you're unrepentant. You're not going to evade God's judgment. And we're going to see later on in the chapter that Ahab, though he didn't believe God, but kind of in his heart, he knew. I don't know how to say this. It's like he didn't believe God, but in his heart he believed God. And I don't mean savingly, because you see the man trying to evade God's prophecy against him. Let's just read about, let's go to the first 12 verses here, and we're going to see how Ahab hated the truth. I really want to get a good majority of this chapter. Anyway, verse number 1, 1 Kings 22. And they continued 3 years without war between Syria and Israel. There's those 3 years of peace that Israel got to enjoy. Verse 2, and it came to pass in the 3rd year that Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. So Jehoshaphat of the southern kingdom meets up with Ahab, king of the northern kingdom. Verse 3, and the king of Israel said unto his servants, notice what Ahab says, know ye that Ramoth in Gilead is ours. Here's a city that is rightfully ours. And we be still and take it not out of the hand of the king of Syria. So Syria had taken this city, but it rightfully belonged to Israel. And Ahab's upset about that. Verse number 4. And he said unto Jehoshaphat, wilt thou go with me to battle to Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as thou art, my people as thy people, my horses as thy horses. So Ahab just says, Jehoshaphat, let's go get this land back. And Jehoshaphat says, hey, we're all Jews here. Let's go. It's ours. Verse 5. And Jehoshaphat said unto the king of Israel, and he was a good king. Notice what Jehoshaphat said to Ahab about going to war with Syria. Inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. And that's a good thing. But notice what Ahab does in verse number 6. And we're beginning to see he's a man who hated the truth. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said unto them, shall I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall I forbear? And they said, go up, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. Now, I hope you guys can read into this. I think Brother Larry already got it. But these 400 men, these prophets, anybody take a guess what kind of prophets they are? They're prophets of Baal. That's what they are. And Jehoshaphat said, let's inquire of the Lord. Ahab says, yeah, that's a good idea. Let me get my prophets of Baal. And they say, yeah, Ahab, the Lord's with you. The Lord's going to deliver him. Verse number 7. Jehoshaphat knows better. And Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of the Lord besides, that we may inquire of him? And notice how Ahab responds. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, there is yet one man, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, by whom we may inquire of the Lord, but I hate him. For he doth not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. Wow. We have to look at that a little more. And Jehoshaphat said, let not the king say so. I wonder why Ahab didn't like Micaiah. I mean, he said it right there. He didn't like him because he didn't tell him the truth. That's what it was. Micaiah told him the truth. He just didn't tell him what he wanted to hear. Boy, there's a lot there. Verse 9. Then the king of Israel called an officer and said, hasten hither Micaiah the son of Imlah. So go get the prophet. Go get the man of God. Verse 10. And the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, sat each on his throne. Visualize this picture. Having put on their robes in a void place in the entrance of the gate of Samaria. And all the prophets prophesied before them. I mean, each king on their throne in this place in Samaria. And all these prophets, 400 prophets are coming before him, prophesying. What a spectacular display. Verse 11. And Zedekiah, the son of Kenana, made him horns of iron. And he said, thus saith the Lord, with these shalt thou push the Syrians until thou have consumed them. And all the prophets prophesied so, saying, go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. Now that's the message of the 400 prophets of Baal, prophesying to Ahab about what he should do concerning going to war with Syria and taking back that city, Ramoth Gilead. Wow. Ahab hated the truth so much, he just said, he hated the truth so much, he was willing to listen to 400 prophets rather than one man of God. What we notice here is those 400 prophets, what did they tell Ahab in reality? That's exactly right, Brother Lynn. All they did is they told the king what he wanted to hear. That's it. But there was one prophet that told him the truth. Now, we haven't gotten to that yet. We haven't got to what Micaiah says, but there's one prophet that's going to tell him the truth. But what I notice here is this shows us a danger. It shows us that there's a great danger in surrounding ourselves only with the voices that agree with us, instead of seeking God's truth. That's exactly what Ahab was doing. Even if the truth was hard to hear, it's still the truth. And that's what you want to hear, right? Just give me the truth. I may not like it, but it's the truth, right? Even a hard truth is much better than an easy lie, right? It's just a pleasant lie or something that's... But Ahab didn't care. Only thing he cared about was what sounded good to him. And the prophets knew it. Now, can you imagine the spectacle? What was his name? Zedekiah, that prophet there. He made horns of iron. Both kings are on their throne, 400 prophets, this beautiful display. I wonder what that man was doing. Horns of iron, he probably placed them on his head, and he's putting on some demonstration before the king. Oh, this is what God showed me you're going to do. You're going to push those Syrians out just like a bull would with these horns of iron, all this stuff. Anyway, let's pick up in verse number 13. Because God opens up heaven for us here in just a minute. We've seen what's going on earth before Ahab and Jehoshaphat with these prophets lying to Ahab about what he should do, or telling Ahab what he wants to hear. Verse 13. And the messenger that was gone to call Micaiah spake unto him, saying, here's the messenger that went to go get the prophet of God. Notice what he says right off the bat. Behold now, the words of the prophets declare good unto the king with one mouth. Let thy word, I pray thee, be like the word of one of them, and speak that which is good. What's he saying already? Just, Micah, all you got to do is this one thing, man. Don't mess it up. If you know what's good for you, just go right along with it. Hey, if you do this, Micah, the king will bless you. He'll probably give you money. He'll probably give you a house. There's no telling what. You tell the king what he wants to hear, he'll probably reward you for it, right? We know how things work. And so right off the bat, the messenger is saying the king doesn't want to hear the truth. Just tell him what he wants to hear. Right off the bat, he's saying he doesn't want to hear what God has to say. Just tell him what he wants to hear. All right, verse number 14. And Micaiah said, as the Lord liveth, what the Lord saith unto me, that will I speak. So he came to the king, and the king said unto him, Micaiah. Now, there's some humor in this, and I hope you pick up on it. So he came to the king, and the king said unto him, Micaiah, shall we go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we forbear? And he answered him, go and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. Now, just reading that far might be a little confusing, but verse 16 opens it up. And the king said unto him, this is Ahab responding, how many times shall I adjure thee that thou tell me nothing but that which is true in the name of the Lord? Ahab knew Micaiah was just, these are men here. Micaiah understands the situation. He knows Ahab's not going to listen. And so he just says, go ahead and go, Ahab. And Ahab's like, just tell me the truth. What's that famous line in the movie? You can't handle the truth, right? Something like that. Anyway, that was a horrible reference because I really don't even know what the movie was. I've just heard a lot. Anyway, probably a horrible movie, right? And verse 17, here's where we are. And he said, I saw, now Micah is telling him, this is what God told me. And he said, I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills. He's talking about the army of Israel. And I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let them return every man to his house in peace. That's a picture of a military defeat where their captain has been killed. And all the soldiers are running back to their house. That's what Micah's saying. He said, you want to know what God said? This is what he said. Verse 18. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, did I not tell thee that he would prophesy no good concerning me, but evil? And so he didn't want the truth. Micah knew it. Ahab said, just tell me the truth. Then when he tells him the truth, he's like, see, I told you he won't tell me anything good. All right, now, in verse 19, heaven is opened up. And he said, hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. He takes us from earth into the throne of heaven. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. What a picture. And the Lord said, who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner. And there came forth a spirit, and stood before the Lord, and said, I will persuade him. And the Lord said unto him, wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, thou shalt persuade him, and prevail also. Go forth and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these thy prophets, and the Lord hath spoken evil concerning thee. So Micaiah told Ahab, don't go up the battle, you're going to get killed. And then I'm not saying he didn't say don't go up, but he's telling him that's what's going to happen. If you go up, you're going to get killed. But we need to go a little farther than that, because God has already executed judgment on Ahab because he killed Naboth. Anyway, Micah is telling him, this is what God's going to do. This is what's going to happen. And this is how it's going to go about happening. God, there's a lot, all these prophets of yours, these 400 prophets, they're all lying to you, Ahab, and they're going to convince you to go up. Don't you think that would make Ahab's gears start to turn and think about what's going on here? Well, you think. Let's read a little bit more. Verse number 24. But Zedekiah, remember, he's the one who made them horns of iron, the son of Chineoth, went near and smote Micaiah on the cheek and said, which way went the Spirit of the Lord from me to speak unto thee? Sarcasm there. Verse 25. And Micaiah said, behold, thou shalt see in that day, when thou shalt go into an inner chamber to hide thyself. So what Micaiah is saying is, you want to know where God's Spirit's at? And he said, you're going to find out. He said, when Ahab dies, and all the king's counselors and all the rest of the king's men of authority come looking for you, because you're the one who told him to go to battle, and that's the very battle he died in, and you're running and hiding, you're going to know on that day. Verse 26. And the king of Israel said, take Micaiah and carry him back unto Ammon, the governor of this city, and to Joash the king's son, and say, thus saith the king. Notice the price that Micaiah paid for telling the truth. Put this fella in the prison and feed him with bread of affliction and with water of affliction until I come in peace. Well, notice what verse 28 says. Micaiah said, if thou return at all in peace, the Lord hath not spoken by me. And he said, hearken, O people, every one of you. He said, all y'all better listen to what I'm saying. All right. When pressed, when Micaiah was pressed to tell Ahab, he told him, and it was a clear prophecy that he was going to die. I just find it interesting that God opens up opens up heaven and tells us and shows us the mechanics behind this event. The judgment against Ahab had already been decreed, and then there's a lying spirit. They're counseling, if that's the right. They're going to go and use Ahab's prophets to deceive him and lie. And the Lord said in verse 22, thou shalt persuade him and prevail also. Go forth and do so. And the reason why God does this is because he's already decreed judgment against Ahab. It's already, and so God sovereignly permits a lying spirit to deceive Ahab through those prophets. And it's the very prophets that Ahab himself had chosen. And if you will, God was giving Ahab over to the deception that he desired himself. Wow. Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is God has given Ahab exactly what he wanted. And he wanted a lie to believe so that God's judgment would be fulfilled, if you will. All right, let's pick on verse 29, and this is a dramatic end to the life of Ahab here. Verse 29. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, went up to Ramoth Gilead. Oh, they didn't listen. He didn't listen. At least Ahab didn't listen to Micaiah. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and enter into the battle. But put thou on thy robes. And the king of Israel disguised himself and went into the battle. Now, hold on just a minute. Why would Ahab be disguising himself? Just state the obvious. What is it? He's the one they want to kill. But even I think it's even more than that. Yeah, the Syrians want to kill. Yes, they obviously want to kill him. But God said, you go up here and you're going to die. And here he disguises himself so he doesn't look like the king. I think he's trying to evade, circumvent, if you will, or avoid God's judgment. I think that's what he's doing. You see what I'm saying? The man didn't believe God. He hated the truth, but here he is acting in a way that subconsciously says, I know that's the truth. Because if he really didn't believe that he was going to die, why is he disguising himself? I don't know. That's kind of where my mind is going there. He wasn't going to take any chances. Maybe that's it. Yeah, he wasn't going to take any chances. So let's look a little bit more here. Verse 31. But the king of Syria commanded his 32 captains that had rule over his chariots, saying, notice what he says, fight neither with small nor great, save only with the king of Israel. Well, who put that in that king's heart? God did. And it came to pass when the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat. See, they're going, when the Syrians come, they're fighting and they've got one target. And that one target is Ahab. And so they see Jehoshaphat, which was he has the royal robes on, so they just assumed that was Ahab. So they're charging after him, going to kill him. Verse 32. Came to pass when the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, that they said, surely it is the king of Israel. And they turned aside to fight against him. And Jehoshaphat cried out. And it came to pass when the captains of the chariots perceived that it was not the king of Israel, that they turned back from pursuing him. They're like, we got the wrong guy. And so they didn't even kill him. So they're like, all right, Ahab's somewhere else. And notice what happens in verse 32. And a certain man, notice the wording, and a certain man drew a bow at a venture and smote the king of Israel between the joints of the harness. Wherefore he said unto the driver of his chariot, turn thine hand and carry me out of the host, for I am wounded. Let's make sure we understand what happened in verse number 34. A certain man, what's it mean when it says he drew a bow at a venture? He wasn't aiming at anything. He just said, whoosh. And guess where that arrow went? What was that? Where God said it would go. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. An anonymous soldier fired a random arrow, and it found the one small gap in the armor of the one disguised man on the battlefield that God had sentenced to death. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. Wow. Verse number 35. And the battle increased. Ahab's wounded in verse 34. And the battle increased that day. And the king was stayed up in his chariot against the Syrians and died at even. And the blood ran out of the wound into the midst of the chariot. Now remember, God pronounced a judgment on Ahab after Ahab had Naboth stoned. Remember, Ahab was stoned in the city there, and something about the dogs did something with Naboth's blood. Anybody remember that? Licked his blood up. And then God said something to Ahab. He said, buddy, the dog's going to lick your blood up in this very same place. 3 years had passed by. Maybe Ahab thought, God forgot all about that. Nope. All right, verse 36. And there went a proclamation throughout the host about the going down of the sun, saying, every man to his city and every man to his own country. Remember Micaiah's prophecy? How do you say, the master or the king's going to be smitten and all Israel scattered like sheep to their own house. That's exactly what happened. Verse 37. So the king died and was brought to Samaria. And they buried the king in Samaria, and one washed the chariot in the pool of Samaria, And the dogs licked up his blood as they washed his armor according to the word of the Lord which he spake. Wow. Ahab, when he went to battle, of course, he bleeds out in his chariot and he dies. And the army sees that their shepherd's gone, their leader's gone. They scatter their homes, just like God said. But Ahab wore a disguise. A soldier drew a bow at a venture, just randomly. Doesn't that tell us a little something about God's judgment? Or maybe we could put it this way. Can any of man's plans or disguises stop the fulfillment of God's judgment? It's not going to happen. There's no, if God says he's going to do something, there's nothing you and I can do. There's no plan, no scheme, no disguise. There's nothing that we can do to prevent it from happening. It's just going to happen. Wow. I'll give you that reference to Naboth and Ahab. That's in 1 Kings 21:19. It says, "Thus saith the Lord, in the place where the dogs licked the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine." Now that had come to pass. And so I think Ahab here is a warning to everybody. He was a man who was blessed with the nation of Israel to rule. And he was a man that was shown mercy by God time and time again. But this man chose to hate the truth because it exposed his sin. He rejected God's prophets. This man embraced idolatry. He lived his life of covetousness, greed, and violence. And in the end, no disguise could hide this man. And no random arrow could miss this man when the time for God's judgment come. I just find that amazing. I find it amazing.
He set old Jehoshaphat up.
He did.
He set him up. You wear the robes.
Yeah, you look. Yeah, I don't want to be them. Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. He set the man up. I mean, who wants to go to battle with a target on their back? And that's essentially what he did to Jehoshaphat. And he said, and Ahab, maybe he just said, I'll just look like one of these other. You know, the Bible doesn't give us all those details, but he couldn't. He could hide. He could hide from people, but he couldn't hide from God. Wow. All right, that's really all that I've got for us this morning. Because next we're going to look at Ahab's son next week. Because the rest of God's prophecy against the house of Ahab is not yet, it's not completely fulfilled, and we'll see that in his son's reign next. Any thoughts on this? And we'll dismiss a few minutes early.
Well, I just think it's interesting that he was in the chariot for the rest, the remainder of the afternoon.
Yeah, you're right. It said.
Think about what was going on.
Well, verse 35, yeah. And the battle increased that day, and the king was stayed up in his chariot against the Syrians. You know, I think in battle, people would look to their king, and he kind of gave them encouragement, maybe. So maybe they were just kind of propping him up. I don't know. I'm looking at the wording of verse 35, and the king was stayed up in his chariot. Maybe that's not the right sense, but I just want what I was wondering. Yeah, he didn't die until the evening. So here he just kind of stands. You know, he's.
You had to think about when he was dying.
He's like, he knew what was coming. I mean, as soon as that arrow hit him, he had to know, oh, I messed up. Had to know. His mind had to have immediately went back to what Elijah said to him after he killed Naboth. And here this man is bleeding out and he's seen all his blood filling up the floor of that chariot. He had to be thinking, he's probably looking around for dogs. It is. It's huge, yeah. But he hated the truth. Man hated the truth. He hated the truth because it exposed him for who he was. He died disguised, died in shame. He rejected the truth, but he kind of knew the truth was going to happen. Wow, I don't know. I think, yeah, but a lot of people are like that. They know what the truth is. They know it's right. They just want to do what they want to do anyway. Maybe they think, well, I can get around the consequences. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Anything else before we dismiss it in prayer? They know. They know all along. You're exactly right. They just don't want to admit the truth, accept the truth, because it exposes them for what they are. Now they got to be accountable to God. Well, you're going to be accountable anyway. You might as well get right now while you have time. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word, and we pray that you'll help us as your people to see that there's no disguise, no plan, or any such thing that can avoid your judgment. Help us also to see, Lord, that you're sovereign over all things. And it's a dangerous place for a person to be in when they surround themselves only by people that tell them what they want to hear. Help us, Lord, to receive your truth even when it's not comfortable, even when it exposes us. Help us to accept it as truth and to agree with it, Lord.